I am a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, in recovery for anger and pride, struggling with people-pleasing and procrastination. My name is Jim.
Hi, Jim.
In 1956, not many babies under 4 pounds made it here, but here I am. I was born with club feet. Doctors said that one of the very best orthopedic surgeons is in the hospital today. So I was fitted with casts from hip to toe on both legs. My parents were told my heart and lungs were strong, but they still had to keep me in an incubator. The plus being a preemie, my bones were soft and the corrective casts were very effective. The downside of growing from that small is the cast had to be changed weekly. So the loud noise of the vibrator that used to shatter and remove the cast scared me, and I cried every time. Still don't like sounds like that. I grew up being raised by good parents. They met at MSU. Dad is an architect, and Mom's dual degrees were in retailing and home economics. Mom was a stay-at-home mom, and they sacrificed, so we had piano lessons, Boy Scouts, Little League, middle school and high school band, and all the costs that go along with them. My dad is an only child, and my grandfather had once told my mom that if I tell Robert not to marry you, he won't. We lived next door to my dad's parents. They had given our lot to Mom and Dad as a wedding gift. There are benefits and detriments to that arrangement. My grandparents also held the mortgage on our home. That may have been a benefit, but it was also a control issue of my grandmother's. Once an adult, I realized that my grandmother's control issues were emphasized by my dad's inability to truly leave and cleave to my mom, as described in Genesis. Instead, allowing my grandmother to undermine my mom's parenting and discipline, also hurting my mom's emotional well-being. It didn't help matters by me going next door to my grandparents to tattle on my mom after being disciplined. We did spend most Friday overnights at my grandparents' when my parents were bowling. The good memories of making popcorn and watching TV with them. My grandpa was my best adult friend. He worked at Saginaw Steering Gear. He was home from work by 3:30 in the afternoon, so we had a lot of afternoon together before dinner, hoeing the garden, planting and picking vegetables. There's a story of him filling pots with soil and seeds and handing them to me to be put aside. But I was dumping out the soil and restacking the pots. So I guess some early OCD. Once the freezer was filled with enough vegetables and fruit, we were allowed to sell the rest of the crops. So even at 7 or 8 years old, we all had earned money to spend. My mom parented with logic and fair and firm discipline. I never heard, "Wait till your father gets home." She would deal with me right away. Sometimes was spanking, sometimes was a talk through. As soon as the disobedient spirit was broken, the spanking stopped. She was very wise in her discipline. My dad parented with humor and play, but now as an adult I realized he had surrendered much of the authority he should have had owned to my mom. And Mom had to pick up the slack out of my dad's lack of courage. Dad always had time for us and for me and my brothers. Playing catch, frisbee, taking me to small game hunting, rabbit, squirrel or pheasant, and especially grackles, which are blackbirds that have taken over the large birdhouse that was supposed to house the mosquito-eating purple martins. Early teen years were somewhat of a blur. I don't have many memories of that time. Good memories were working in the garden with my grandpa and dad, planting the garden in the spring, mowing the yard in the summer, raking the huge mounds of leaves in the fall, and plowing snow in the winter. When I was 12, my dad's boss decided to retire. At that time, the architect office consisted of my dad and Sam, the owner of the firm. Sam had left at a time when there was no new work in the hopper in the planning, breaking a promise he had told my parents they wouldn't ever do that. I imagine both my mom and dad were terrified. I know that my mom was very angry about it, but it was my mom who was able to voice her fear. I remember my parents sitting on the front porch with the front door closed to us. That was the only time I had seen either of my parents drunk my mom drinking beer to cope. That may have been the time that she started taking Valium. I later discovered that she had been on it for close to 30 years. Adding to the stress that had just added to be was they had just added on to the house, taking a loan to complete it, and bought a new car, depleting their savings. My dad did get a second job working at a nursery landscaping company, working in the evenings. My mom started working again, first as a substitute teacher for a short while, then sewing drapes for an interior designing company. She was an excellent seamstress. She worked long hours, often till 2 or 3 in the morning. She took on the difficult drapes, the shears, and the nasty fiberglass fabric that they used in the 60s. I first viewed pornography in my mid-teen years. The Playboy magazines were in plain sight on the magazine rack at the grocery store. While Mom was cashing out her groceries, I had a few minutes to look through the magazines. I was able to stop pornography use many years later when I was involved in a ministry called Victorious Ministries Through Christ that offered ministry sessions that are very similar to a CR's step study. There I was ministered to by praying through a list that's similar to Celebrate Recovery's step study list, but you do it in one time in 4 to 5 hours. I decided then there that I was not going to have to confess porn usage every time I attended a prayer school, so I was able to stop porn usage. Late teen years, I was influenced by some of my friends and veered further off path. The state of Michigan decided to reduce the drinking age of alcohol to 18. So in my senior year of high school, my friends and I would go to the party store and buy alcohol. I started drinking, smoking pot, and then pills, realizing now that this was people-pleasing behavior, wanting to fit in with some of my friends. I knew all along this behavior was wrong and steeped in sin and rebellion. When I should have been leading friends to God, I was allowing them to lead me to rebellion and sin. And knowing that what I was doing was completely wrong and rebellious to God, to parents, and of course the law too. I had a girlfriend at that time who adored me, but I treated her like garbage. We lost our virginity together. I had started Delta College after high school. My plans were to go on to MSU and become a veterinarian, but pot and beer and pills occupied my time and my efforts and thoughts. After about 18 months, I dropped out of college, but not before skipping many classes I had already paid for. During that time, I had a pretty good paying part-time job at the library, and it fit into my college schedule. But I blew that off when the director confronted me about the lack of tasks being completed. I actually told him that I didn't care about the job. During this time, I was buying pot in quantity, figuring I could sell some and smoke for free. Myself and 2 buddies were planning on fishing up near All Gray. 2 of us didn't even have fishing licenses. Steve picked us up in his Pinto, and while on US 23, we were pulled over for a headlight out. It's odd that both headlights were working when we left home. The state troopers found us smoking pot and drinking beer as we were driving. They searched the car and found nearly a quarter pound of pot stashed in various places in Steve's car. The troopers asked us to follow them to the Tawas post to be booked. Ironically, we pointed out to them that they had a taillight out. Being out of work is not the best response to a trooper when he's arresting you. Mercifully, I was charged and paid fines and no jail time. The charge was to be expunged if I had no further charges. I had a job at a gas station for a short while, and my best friend from the neighborhood was the manager. While working, I had a customer approach me asking for drug money that he would be able to double in a couple hours and pay me back. The scheme was for me to give him money from the till. I did give him the money, and obviously it was a scam, and now I was going to have to come up with an account for the money. I lied and called the police, stating that I'd been robbed. I was found out and threatened by the detective with a charge of filing a false police report. And of course, my friend had to fire me. At 20, I bought a motorcycle, and there is no point in buying anything other than a fast motorcycle. I owned it for 2 years, and over that time I had gotten so many speeding tickets I was on a restricted license, only allowed to drive to and from work and home. One time I was pulled over in the city of Saginaw for going 60 and a 25, and the officer asked, "Where are you going in such a hurry?" And I replied, "Third to fourth gear." He was not amused and wrote another of my many tickets that I had earned. That blatant rebellion to my list of recovery topics. It's a miracle I did not get hurt or killed. My riding was so crazy. I was still attending church on a somewhat regular basis, sometimes playing my French horn for Easter and Christmas Eve services. One Christmas Eve service, I had gone out after my job at a restaurant to the bar and arrived at the church feeling drunk and very guilty, knowing that I was behaving so badly. My dad got me a job at a construction company, but I wasn't even serious enough to even buy the most basic tools for the job. My dad referred me to a job at First State Bank, and I was hired as a records clerk. Those days we weren't online, and so we would take the phone calls from the tellers and the businesses for account balances. We also sorted the checks to be mailed with statements each month. I was relegated to the 11 a.m. lunchtime, and there were 3 ladies on that same lunch. After a year or so, one of those ladies was going through a divorce. She had the most beautiful brown eyes I'd ever seen. And she wasn't going to get away. There was a work Christmas party at one of our co-workers' homes, and someone dared Suze to give me a kiss. She didn't give up and she fulfilled the dare, of course. My best friend Mark and his fiancée were concerned about me dating a little bit older divorced woman. My previous girlfriend was just plain mean, and I had put up with her. We all met for dinner and drinks, and Mark and Lori fell in love with Susan too. By now I had decided that pot had no place in my life and had quit using it. We were married in 1980. Since we both worked at First State Bank, there was a work rule that spouses could not work together. So I started a job selling insurance, joining Lutheran Brotherhood, working closely with Susan's brother, David. I failed at that position, having good training and learned and passed all the licensing tests. But people-pleasing and fear of being rejected caused me not to close sales, even though I was able to schedule many appointments. In the early 80s, my best friend Mark was diagnosed with cancer. As he declined, he moved back home with his mom so he and his wife Lori could care for him. I withdrew from him out of fear, and by the time I had the courage to call his mom for a visit, she said that he was too far along to know anyone. I was ashamed and still am to this day, feeling that I had abandoned him. He passed away when we were 30. In 1983, I had learned that a Domino's Pizza franchise was looking to open multiple stores in Saginaw. I started as a manager trainee and later earned promotion to a store of my own, one of the 4 in town. In 1989, Chris offered me a position as a manager over her 3 Domino's stores in Livingston County. The pay was enough for Susan to be home at work for a while with Sarah in kindergarten and Dan 18 months. So we moved to Fowlerville the first weekend of 1989. We attended a Lutheran church similar to our church in Saginaw. In 1991, we sat down and met with the pastor to discuss the church's neutral stand on abortion and homosexuality. We decided to leave that Lutheran denomination. That led us to Fowlerville UB, and Susan and I were both baptized in Thompson Lake. I was laid off from Domino's in 1991 to our sales plummeting by nearly half. The Detroit Tigers and Domino's were both owned by Tom Monahan at that time, and the Tigers' decision not to renew Ernie Harwell's contract affected our sales that much. I was able to drive for Domino's in the evening and start a job at Jiffy Lube franchise in Lansing during the day as a manager trainee. Our budget was extremely tight, but we were provided for. We continued to tithe on our reduced income. One time we were low in some of the basics, one of them being toilet paper, with 2 little kids. On one visit with Sue's parents, Mom brought a couple of steaks, a bag of oranges, and a package of toilet paper, just what we needed, since we were lower until payday. Backing up a bit, I had always believed the Bible to be the true Word of God and that Jesus was my Savior. I just didn't walk the talk. I harbored a lot of anger at myself for being a lazy druggie and drunk and not following through on my career goal and instead having a number of just jobs. That anger spilled out on people I loved the most, mainly Susan. 2006, I was working as a body shop assistant manager for Prescool Chevrolet in Okemos. Graff Company was decided to buy that dealership, and they didn't employ assistant managers, so I was let go. I interviewed at Citizens Insurance and was hired in a crazy, unexpected short time, less than a week. Citizens' pay schedule was different too. I was paid for 5 weeks that month. Susan still received sarcasm that would be called verbal abuse from me, my anger with myself, and my station in life being a disappointment to myself. She remarked to me once that I don't even recognize you. In August 2016, I started attending Celebrate Recovery. I have completed a step study, but have not been nearly successful at conquering my anger as I would have hoped. Not sure if I recognize anger welling up earlier or if I'm just still not doing as well as I'd hoped. When this happened, Susan and I joked that we hate it when CR points that out. We realize our shortcomings rising and we make amends quickly and keep a short list of accounts. I came in to Celebrate Recovery dealing with anger and pride, but realizing that they were a result of my people-pleasing and procrastination. In 2017, my youngest brother John and my best friend passed away from cancer at 54. That shook my faith more than a little. God had not answered my prayers that John would be healed. I didn't doubt God's power or authority, but I was heartbroken that he had not healed John. I had the privilege to help baptize John a few years earlier, so I knew his salvation was secure. I'm still a work in progress and nowhere near where I want to be as far as kindness attitude towards others. Remembering I have no idea what others are going through. Realizing how hard it is to work through recovery once I realize my sin patterns before they become sin. I was joking with step study participants how we compare our recovery to peeling an onion. Initially thinking that my onion was the size of a pearl onion, but it's the size of a Vidalia. Romans 6:1 is my favorite verse. And what shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? By no means. And my favorite verse from Isaiah 61. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom to the captives, to release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and to provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. In step 12, having had a spiritual experience as a result of these steps, I try to carry this message to others and practice these principles in all our affairs. I'm a work in progress. I won't be finished or perfect till I'm safe in heaven. Thanks for listening.